So Pranam Swamiji, and we thank for giving such a wonderful and great auspicious opportunity as a first interaction with our Center of Consciousness and so our Government University, the first step towards a very long journey to have a very fruitful collaboration. So we have heard Swami Sarvapriyanji talking about the sleep perspective, about the deep sleep, the importance of deep sleep, and also Madam has shared the work that we have been carrying it out, where we have shown that how the meditation can influence the sleep and the sleep architecture. So in this presentation, I would like to just give you a hypothetical view, because based on the last slide, what Madam has showed, that how the meditator's brain during sleep is entirely different from a non-meditator's brain. And from here, we would like to undergo a hypothesis that how the sense of self and the consciousness in deep sleep could be evolved or could be generated as a correlate of a brain mechanism. So, and we feel that okay, sleep could be one of the best behavioral model to study the neural correlate of mind and the consciousness, because during wake, the understanding of cognitive things is associated with certain stimuli that gets into the brain, and any stimuli that gets into the brain will jump into many activities with the neural activities with lot of permutation and combination, and to decipher all these things, okay, will be quite challenging. So then we thought, okay, there should be one normal, universal, natural model where we can try to understand the brain correlate of self. That is, we feel that deep sleep is the best model. So we know that the deep sleep is, we don't have any external stimuli, nor we have an internal stimuli that is going on in the deep sleep state. But still, right, when we get up early in the morning and we feel, okay, I slept very well. So how is the self, I mean, from the physiology point of view or from the neural point of view, can be imprinted or ingrained in the brain, and how is that a person can really tell that okay, he had a very refreshing sleep, and when during sleep, when the person doesn't have any either the external input nor there is any internal input that is going to the brain. So that's why we thought, okay, to bridge the certain psychological and philosophical aspects of the self, understanding self and the experience, probably sleep, that too as a deep sleep, can be a very good model to study the human beings. So now we know that sleep is a very valuable behavioral state, and it is very much essential for our daily life. And sleep is not a phenomena that is generated in one area of the brain. So here we can see that okay, the many parts of the brain, they interact with each other to generate sleep. And sleep is not a homogeneous state; it's a heterogeneous state. So we know that we have two types of sleep. One is NREM sleep and REM sleep. So if you look at this, you can see while we go to sleep, we spend some, say, initially 10-15 minutes in drowsy state. Then we go to the stage 1 and stage 2, which we call it a very light sleep stage. Then we go to stage N3, that is a deep sleep state. And we spend in deep sleep state for a certain period of time. Then we come back to a REM sleep, that is called as a rapid eye movement sleep state. And this rapid eye movement sleep state is where actually the dream will start appearing. No doubt, even in NREM sleep also there will be a dream, but the content of the dream during REM sleep will be more of emotive in nature, right, rather than in the that is there in the NREM sleep. So this particular cycle, it repeats throughout the night, and this cycling of NREM sleep and REM sleep is very, very important for the quality of sleep, and also it is very important for the brain itself, for the efficient working of the brain. Now, when we sleep throughout the night, we see that in the first half of the night, we spend more in deep sleep, where in the early in the morning, in the later half of the night, we spend more in the REM sleep state. So this is just to give you the initial overview of architecture of sleep in a normal adult human being, right? How the sleep is arranged, and this sleep is brought about by many networks in the brain. It is not by that of a unitary or activity. So this particular slide shows that, right? I won't go into the technical details about which are the areas that are involved during NREM sleep, the areas which are involved during REM sleep. But this cyclical pattern of NREM sleep and REM sleep, it is what it happens with activation and deactivation. So when from NREM sleep, when person reaches the REM sleep, there will be a progressive increase in the activation. So this activation and deactivation is always, it is happening throughout the sleep. So this plays a very important role, for us to understand the first person perspective of the phenomenology, right? Especially with that of a deep sleep state, when the brain is fully into a hyperpolarized or a deactivated state. What is the first person perspective in the deep sleep state? Now, why this is very important is, earlier when the behaviorism or the cognitive neuroscience, it evolved, the aspect of cognition was always related to some external stimuli. You need some external stimuli, something happens in the brain. Okay, so what is the behavior and what is the correlate? Then subsequently, right, we came to that even during our wake activity, during wake state and REM state, that is in dream state, is almost identical with each other. Therefore, the the first person perspective from wakefulness and from the brain perspective, when the wakefulness and REM sleep are almost identical as far as the brain activity is concerned, so it means that but in our experience, the consciousness or the conscious experience is not the same. So it means that what it is not just the consciousness is a byproduct of some sensory stimuli that goes into the brain, but the events that is triggered inside the brain itself is what results in varied types of conscious experience. So that there should be some internal modulation that should take place in the brain, and we have to study that internal modulation triggered or may not be triggered, or triggered by external stimuli during wake, or the internal modulation they happen per se that can happen even during deep sleep state. So now, rather than linking from the external input to the events bringing about conscious experience, now we are shifting that itself, the internal modulation itself, that how can conscious experience can bring about, right? Or the brain can bring about this conscious experience during deep sleep. So Madam also told about the level and the content of consciousness. So this also speaks about the same thing. But I'll go much more, further. So during different behavioral states, say when we are awake or light sleep or deep sleep, so there are two things that we have to see. So we know very, very clearly which are the neural network that determines the level of consciousness. Means when we are awake, when we are light sleep, when we go to deep sleep, it is always the thalamocortical oscillations. So from thalamus to cortex, which goes, that determines the level of the activity of the brain. So in the deep sleep state, your from input from thalamus to cortex is very well minimized, so that no external input is going into the brain. So we go into the deep sleep state. But in the wake state, so there is a lot of inputs that is bombarding to the brain, right? So the brain is always in the active mode or in the wake state. So this is you mean by the level of consciousness. So it can be wake, it can be light sleep, deep sleep, dream sleep, coma, vegetative state, so whatever it is. It's always a thalamocortical oscillation that determines. But the other thing also, we have what is called as content of consciousness. So in a given level of consciousness, either in the wake or in deep sleep, what are the content that is there in the mind? So how integrated is this content is what is determined by our cortical oscillations. So between the two areas of the cortex, how these different cortex they communicate with each other, how efficiently do they communicate is what that determines the content of consciousness. So this is what this slide shows. We have this content of consciousness and the level of consciousness. So here you can clearly see during deep sleep state, right? So thalamocortical oscillations is completely, to the zero level. That is so that there is no external input that is coming up. But at the same time, the cortical oscillations, right, is also disintegrated. So there won't be any integration between the different areas of the cortex. So in the deep sleep state, so we are so even there is no content also. And why there is no content? Because whatever the information that is there in the brain, because of these cortical oscillations or the communication between the two areas of the cortex is not happening. They are functionally disintegrated. That integration of the information doesn't happen during deep sleep, so there won't be any content of the information. So this is the basis of the neural basis of deep sleep. So we are in deep sleep, no contents, because cortical oscillations are completely disintegrated with each other. Now, of course, there are so many different opinions, but one of the very consistent opinion is for a person to, when he gets up early in the morning and when he say that he had a very good refreshing sleep, it means that he should have a sufficient amount of deep sleep that he would have spent in the night. If a person doesn't spend in a deep sleep in the night, right, then when he gets up in the morning, so he may not feel very fresh. So given this background, when there is no internal input and when there is no external input, and when there is no any content of the in the brain, or integration of the content is not happening, how can a person, when he gets up in the morning and he say that I had a good or a refreshing sleep? So where is this I continues, and how can a person tell about this? So is there a memory in the deep sleep? So if at all, if a person tells when he gets up in the morning that I had a refreshing sleep, so is it a recollection of the memory? And if at all, if it is a memory, what is that the phenomena that is happens during deep sleep, that it is encoded in the memory in the brain, and how a person is recollect is what the big question, right? Actually, that we are asking, and we have proposed an hypothesis for this, of course, which we have to really work upon whether this hypothesis is testable or empirically we can test. Of course, our hypothesis can be empirically tested, but we have to prove this by the experimental evidences. So this particular also tells that the same thing, that as the sleep progresses, there will be gradual, the disconnection of the cortical oscillations, right? So there will be loss of this consciousness. See, based on this, it was in 2008, Tononi, who is now a proponent of information integration theory of consciousness. So he said that consciousness is what vanishes every night when we fall into dreamless sleep and reappears when we wake up or when we dream. So it is very, very clear. So with the boundary of telling from the networking of the brain. So we are not talking about the absolute consciousness from the philosophical point of view. We're telling about the say from the experiential, that point of view, that so Tononi says in deep sleep there is no consciousness at all. So this is what he stands in 2008. So this is a default view of consciousness that is highly prevalent in academia as far as from the sleeping brain is concerned. Now, in these two, you can see during wake, there is a connection between the few parts of the brain, we call it PC, IPA, so many things over here, and also the cortical area of the brain. But during deep sleep, only this part of the brain is connected, but not the cortical part of the brain. Now, this part of the brain, right? So we call it as default mode of networking, is what Madam gradually we mentioned in our last slide, which is one of our latest the work. So as I told that so how can we study a first person perspective retrospectively when we are analyzing the sleep? So when somebody gets up and he says that I had a very refreshing sleep, it is an expression of a first person experience during sleep. Otherwise, if a person is not experienced that he had that something in sleep, he cannot really get up and he say that I had a very good and refreshing sleep. So, and studies, as I told you, of course, we stand that with that view that deep sleep is very much essential for a person to tell that he had a very refreshing sleep. So, where this eye, how does this eye continues, right, during deep sleep? Not only that, and how that a person experiences refreshing thing or the experience of say contentment or the happiness during sleep. So this is where we have these some of the theses with this philosophical arguments about the deep sleep. So when a person tells he had a refreshing sleep, so it tells that sleep is not a break in the consciousness. So there should be a continuity of consciousness. And sleep state is not a state of absence of any experience, but there should be an experience during sleep. And so these are the two emphasis where from the we can empirically examine it with an hypothesis and test. But there are also philosophical things where say there's a sleep is a state of self-luminosity, and sleep, of course, psychologically they say sleep is a state of knowledge of nothing, and all with all this psychological and philosophical thesis will come. But we'll try to fix on from the neuroscience perspective only first the two important things. So that is there a gap in the loss of consciousness during deep sleep, and or is a deep sleep is a state of consciousness or unconsciousness, and how is this I is preserved during sleep. So for this, so we'll take two important thing with the prevalent things in the neuroscience is about the default mode of networking. See, this default mode of networking in the brain is those areas of the brain where they're involved in, say, mind wandering, they're involved in metacognitive things, they're involved in, say, attention, concentration, cognition, with all these things. But this DMN network is also associated with mind wandering. Not only this, and DMN network, its efficiency and its interaction with other areas of the brain is associated with developing the higher cognitive capabilities also. So now the whole area of the meditation studies or the cognitive studies is now focusing on how this DMN network interacts with other areas of the brain so that new higher cognitive capabilities can be developed. Now what happens to this DMN? So we are fixing on to DMN area, that what happens to this DMN area during deep sleep, because it has been very well shown that DMN area is also active in the say coma or the minimal conscious state also. So does coma means is really he's a comatose, or if a vegetative state is really is a vegetative, I mean vegetative state behaviorally he may not be responding, but when we scan his brain, the brain clearly shows that his DMN network is active. It means that there are some inputs that is going on to areas of the brain and it is active, and this DMN, so that he's really he's experiencing himself something, but because it is not connected to other areas of the brain, he is not in a position to express it. So with this particular clue, right, we would like to go ahead that what happens to DMN network during sleep. Now, why this? In one of the important thing area in the DMN network, we call it as insula, right? So we can see our insula over here, and insula is the one area where all the visceral inputs, that gets mapped. So it can be your cardiac input or the respiratory input. Now, according to Damasio's hypothesis, these visceral inputs that gets mapped in the brain is what it generates a body map, and that gets translated into a sense of, say, a sentient self. Say, for example, when we get up early in the morning, when we open our eyes, the first thing that comes to our mind is, okay, right, I am alive, I am there. Then subsequently, rest of the things will come. So now, so the insula is highly mapped, and it has been very clearly shown from posterior insula to anterior insula. The different areas of these insula, it maps the different visceral input, for which the cardiorespiratory input plays a very, very important role. Because this cardiorespiratory input, whether you're in REM sleep, whether you're awake, or whether you're in deep sleep, whether you're in comatose state, whether you're in vegetative state, unless and until your heart and your lungs are functioning quite efficiently, and this is giving a constant input to the brain, and brain is encoding this particular information, and it is keeping that, okay, we are getting some inputs, okay, from these peripheral organs, and it is stored in the insula. Normally what happens during wake, this information from the insula is, because insula is connected to other areas of the brain, so this information is transferred to other areas of the brain, right? And the further information process, it happens, and the person expresses about his feelings, his emotions, right? And we know that all our feelings and emotions is associated also with our respiratory and cardiac activity. So if a person is sad, if a person is feeling good, if a person is happy, right? So for all this emotional state, brain and your cardio and your respiratory system, they synchronize in entirely in a different way, and a person expresses this particular, that particular feeling. Now, so this is just a background. Now, why this background is very important, even from the evolutionary point of view, even though that especially with that of the right insula that is present in the in us and the human brain. So the studies have shown this right insula is very, very important for all our interoceptive awareness or the interoceptive feeling that we get. So if you look at this particular thing, all these red lines that you see, it is from that of a human being, and all the other things is also present in the lower animals, including hypothalamus, so many other things, right? All this, the information that goes to every part of the brain but goes to the right part of the insula, right? It is present in the highly developed in the human being, and it has been very well correlated that any damage, say for example, to this say right insula, right, there's a loss of subjective feeling itself. So right insula plays a very, very important role. So this is what you can see here, the mapping. So you have this mapping of all the emotional awareness that can happen in the different areas of this insula. It can be anger, sadness, fear, happiness. So many things is happening in the insula. And where is the feedback it is coming? The feedback it is coming, okay, from how this cardio and respiratory they synchronize with each other, okay, in certain emotional state. And because of this visceral awareness, right, a person is really experiencing a different what is this emotive state. So this is what even this particular figure also tells, that from all your periphery, right, it goes to the right insula, and the person he experiences a particular state. Now from the, so you have another important organ, right, in the brain. We call it a cingulate. You can see this green color over this. This is a cingulate. So information from the insula, it travels along the cingulate gyrus over here, and in turn, this cingulate has a connection to the other parts of the brain, and which gives the other conscious awareness of an emotive state of a person. So this is the imaging study which shows that even during sleep also the cingulate cortex is active, but in the wake it is more active. But in the sleep it is active, but it is less when compared to wake. So it means that what? It means that even during deep sleep state, because of all these first is this all this information from the periphery is going to insula, and from insula it is going to the cingulate cortex. See, imaging studies have clearly shown that there are many areas in DMN network. I'm focusing only on insula and the cingulate cortex. Insula and cingulate cortex during deep sleep, they are connected with each other. They are not disintegrated at all. But there you have many other DMN network. They disintegrate themselves. But insula and cingulate cortex, they're linked with each other. Now, when they're linked with each other, it means that all our visceral input, it is going to the brain, and from the insula, right, it is getting mapped in the cingulate cortex. So from the the somatomatic hypothesis, right, about Damasio. So if it is the internal or the visceral awareness or interoceptive awareness is what that can give us the feeling of okay, I exist. So I exist means it is not from the philosophical point of view, means I as a body or I as a mind, that I exist. So where this visceral input plays a very, very important role. So in deep sleep, now what happens, that we know that okay, our heart is functioning and our respiration is going on. So this is getting a lot of input, right, to the cingulate and the insula and the cingulate cortex, and it is mapping all our viscera and in there, and brain is getting an information. Okay. So there is a constant input, and it is still it is mapping all our say bodilies and inputs there. But what about the quality? So see, quality, when we this is in a very very simple way to say that okay, this how this say a body is or the viscera is mapped, and it is continued even during deep sleep. But when a person say I'm refreshed, what do you mean by this refresh? Refreshing, we have taken the clue from two important things. Even during wake, say you do a deep breathing. So from say even from the yoga point of view, deep breathing has a very lot of meaning, because we involve with a lot of prana and so many things that comes during deep breathing. Now, even we see that when you say that okay, if you are agitated, if you are if you are very disturbed, you take a deep breath. Okay, it's very well known. Your mind will calm down. You become very cool. And dysregulation of breathing, we know it is associated with lot of emotional states. both in the normal and also in the clinical, the conditions. So then we thought that, okay, there could be some good synchronization that should happen between the cardiac activity and the respiratory activity. And this optimal synchronization is what that could be translated into a state of experience. Because even if you want to get into a meditation, so breathing is given and very important. So this, you take a deep breathing and then you try to focus your mind. So normally in deep sleep, the nature has given such a mechanism that our breathing pattern becomes very slow and very deep, like as if that we are doing a pranayama during our wake. It happens so spontaneous and it's quite very, very natural. It happens during deep sleep state. But when you go to a REM sleep state, our breathing pattern, so it becomes very chaotic. Now, our breathing pattern and our cardiac activity, they are very synchronized with each other. Now, this synchrony, earlier studies have shown that this synchrony is very, very important, right? To have lot of these, internal awareness and also about our emotional status and the way that we feel. Not only that, the cardiac activity is also associated with cognition. One of the thing is that, so why does, when somebody is very anxious, right, there will be an increase in the heart rate or the heartbeat. So there are two things. One is, of course, from the physiology point of view, it is to face the challenge. The second is, it has been known that our cognitive ability will increase in one state of heart rate or the state of the cardiac activity. So that is why I'm telling you all these things is to say that, okay, the way heart and say respiration, they synchronize, it has a tremendous amount on the brain and also about our subjective awareness. So in the deep sleep, what happens? So as I said, the respiration becomes very natural, becomes very deep and very synchronous. So there will be optimum synchronization of both the cardiac activity and the respiratory activity. And the synchronous information is what it could go. We don't know. It could go to the insula, and it could go to the the cingulate cortex, and this what is encoded there as an episodic memory. Now, encoding these things as an episodic memory in the brain is very well known. But what is that memory that is encoded to a person to say that he's feeling refreshed? So we feel that, okay, this synchronous activity is what that could encode in the brain as an episodic memory. And a person, when he gets up in the morning, and when this insula gets connected with other cortical areas, say he can retrieve that back and he says, okay, I had a refreshing sleep. So this plays a very, very important role in many aspects. Now, so from as we know that in our lab also we have shown many results. But so one of the things is that what we have demonstrated is a person who normally what happens in a normal aging process, deep sleep, it reduces by the person goes around 50 years or 60 years. Normally, deep sleep, it will it becomes zero. But in our study, we have shown that even a person of very old age who is regularly meditating, he is retaining his deep sleep state. So if a person is retaining his deep sleep state, so it means that what is his cardiac activity and his respiratory activity is also becoming very, very synchronous. And when he gets up, right, and his sleep quality will also be very good. So the retaining of deep sleep state in the meditators could be the first our finding to have a further more discussion in terms of, right, that how this I is can be encoded, or it could be encoded from the physiology point of view, and how actually this cardiorespiratory synchrony and its mapping in the brain can bring about a subjective sense of, that refreshing, so it can happen. Now, there are other findings also which have clearly shown that a learning can happen during even in NREM sleep. This was one of the very fascinating study. So we talk about only whether a person is conscious or not conscious during sleep. It's not that. Learning can happen. So this particular people, they have tried a thing that if a person wants to say come out of nicotine addiction, and if he's not been successful during wake, can we do it in the sleep state? So they have developed an aversion for the nicotine for a person by developing an habit for the person to get averse for this nicotine during in sleep. So it means that that something we can learn in the sleep also. So if this particular study also gives us a lot of questions. So is the sleep unconscious state? So with this particular study, we can say it may not be an unconscious state because some learning is happening. But is there an attention in sleep, in a normal sleep? So we said that there is no attention in the normal sleep. So when there is no attention in the normal sleep, so how does this learning can happen? So can a learning can happen without an attention at all? And not only that, this particular learning with this nicotine addiction, it's sustained even during his wake when he gets up. So he feel very aversive to the nicotine, and this aversive behavior in the nicotine was sustained for a long period of time, for 10 days or 15 days, and he quit smoking also. It has happened during sleep. So is sleep a cognitive state? If at all, if a deep sleep or a sleep is a cognitive state, so it is what type of cognition that happens during sleep, because learning is happening, and learning is happening without attention. So can learning can happen without attention, or is it a cognitive state, right? Then from the philosophy form to say that the deep sleep or the sleep is not unconscious. As the Tononis claimed in 2008, we can clearly say it is not an unconscious state. It is a conscious state, but it's a different type of consciousness or a conscious state at all. So can we term the sleep as a non-conscious, say, consciousness state, or it can be a non-cognitive consciousness state? So these are some of the intricate debate and the exchange of ideas. I think that it has to happen as far as from the wisdom of our philosophy and from the neuroscience perspective. The other important thing, which is my last slide, which I want to tell is that, so from the practice point of view, we say that pure consciousness, it transcends all the perception and awareness. Of course, so there is no doubt, because it has been withstood from generations to generations, and so all the great rishis have experienced that. But from the science perspective, the question is then, if at the end of the day, if you want to transcend all the perception and awareness, in the process of doing this, right, why is that you have to sharpen one awareness and perception, right? If at all at the end of the day you have to transcend to these capabilities to have that pure consciousness. So does it mean that to experience that pure consciousness with the various stages of your meditative practice, it has to be through the biology, through the sharpening and the of all awareness, and the perception should be there, or is that we have to change the paradigm of our consciousness research where rather than trying to understand the consciousness per se by itself, but can we, as a from the philosophy point of view and from the say research from the modern research point of view, we can stand in one come to the consensus to understand the process of doing it and try to understand that what happens in biology, and then try to evolve a consensus about so how this this consciousness is perceived, or it can be achieved, or it can be say or it can be defined, or so anything like that. But somewhere, as a, from philosophy and from neuroscience point of view, we have to stand in a common platform with a consensus, and I think we have to start our journey. So this is what actually I wanted to share my views. Thank you.